Picture this. It's 1974. Man has walked on the moon. The Vietnam War is ending. Disco is on the radio. And deep inside a jungle in the Philippines, a man is sharpening his blade, loading his rifle, and preparing for another day of war. A war that ended 29 years ago. His name was Hiroo Onoda, and he was one of the most haunting figures to emerge from the Second World War. Not because no one told him it was over. They told him, with leaflets, with loudspeakers, with letters from his own mother. He just didn't believe them. This is the story of one of the most loyal and most tragic soldier of the 20th century. And once you hear it, you won't forget it. To understand what Hiroo Onoda did, you first have to understand what Hiroo Onoda was. He was born on March 19, 1922, in Kamikawa, a quiet village in Japan's Wakayama prefecture. But quiet didn't mean soft. His family carried samurai blood. His father had served in war. The code of the warrior wasn't something Onoda studied in a classroom. It was something he breathed in from the moment he opened his eyes. In that Japan, loyalty to the emperor wasn't just a value, it was a religion. Surrender wasn't just dishonor, it was unthinkable. By 18, he had enlisted in the Imperial Japanese Army. Japan was already at war with China. Within a year, it would be at war with America too, after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. The world was splitting open, and Onoda was walking straight into the fracture. But he wasn't going to be an ordinary soldier. He was chosen for something far more dangerous. In 1942, the army sent him to the Nakano School in Tokyo. You won't find this place in many history books, because that was the point. The Nakano School was Japan's most secretive military institution, a place that trained intelligence officers, covert operatives, and ghosts. Not soldiers who charged into battle, soldiers who disappeared into it. At Nakano, Onoda learned guerrilla warfare, survival in hostile terrain, psychological resistance, how to read propaganda, how to create it, and, crucially, how to identify it when the enemy used it against him. And then, above everything else, one rule was hammered into him day after day after day: you do not surrender under any circumstances, ever. Other soldiers were told death was better than capture. Onoda's training was different. He was told to stay alive, to endure, to keep fighting long after conventional battles had ended, because his kind of war was never truly over. In December 1944, Second Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, just 22 years old, was sent to a remote speck of land in the Philippines called Lubang Island. His orders: conduct guerrilla operations, disrupt the enemy, hold the island, and do not surrender. Reinforcements will come. We will not abandon you, those last words. We will not abandon you. He held them like armor for the next 30 years. When Onoda arrived on Lubang, the situation was already falling apart. The Japanese officers already stationed there outranked him, and they refused to listen. Instead of guerrilla tactics, they chose to meet the incoming American and Filipino forces head-on. A conventional battle. On an island they were about to lose. It was, as history would judge it, a catastrophic mistake. On February 28, 1945, Allied forces stormed Lubang Island and crushed the Japanese defenders in days. Soldiers were killed, others surrendered. The island fell, but Onoda didn't fall with it. He slipped into the jungle with 3 other survivors: Private Yuichi Akatsu, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, and Private First Class Kinshichi Kozuka. 4 men, 4 rifles, 1 mission. They disappeared into the trees. Then came August 1945, the atomic bombs, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Emperor Hirohito's voice crackling across the radio, the first time most Japanese had ever heard it, telling a stunned nation the war was over. Allied planes swept over the Philippine Islands and dropped thousands of leaflets through the jungle canopy. Paper snow fluttering down between the trees. The war has ended. Japan has surrendered. Come out. You are safe. Onoda picked one up, read it carefully, and felt something click into place in his Nakano-trained mind. This was a trick. It had to be. The Americans were trying to flush Japanese soldiers out of hiding. Hadn't his instructors warned him exactly about this? Hadn't they told him the enemy would try anything, to break a soldier's will? He even spotted inconsistencies in the leaflets, small errors, details that didn't quite add up. To his intelligence-trained eye, those errors weren't accidents. They were proof of forgery. "We hold our position," he told his men. "Reinforcements will come." More leaflets came, then newspapers, then loudspeakers mounted at the jungle's edge, voices echoing through the trees, then letters that appeared to be from his own family, his own mother, begging him to come home. One by one, Onoda dismantled every single one. A newspaper could be printed by anyone. A loudspeaker could broadcast lies. And a letter from his mother? That was exactly what a skilled intelligence operation would fabricate to break a man like him. He was too well trained to fall for it, or so he believed. In 1950, 5 years after the war ended, it got worse. Private Akatsu slipped away in the night and surrendered to Filipino forces. He didn't disappear. He came back with a Japanese officer standing at the jungle's edge, calling out to Onoda and the others. Onoda watched from the shadows. He didn't move. A performance, he concluded. A trap. The jungle swallowed him again, and somewhere in the outside world, the 1950s began, then the 1960s, without him. What followed is one of the most extraordinary feats of human endurance ever recorded, and one of its most haunting tragedies. Onoda, Shimada, and Kozuka became ghosts. They moved camp every few days, leaving no trail, no pattern, nothing that could be tracked. They slept in shelters built from jungle materials. They foraged for bananas and coconuts. They stole from farms at night, butchered cattle in the dark, dried the meat to make it last. They mended their uniforms by hand. They cleaned their rifles with religious devotion. Every bullet was precious. Every weapon kept ready for a war they were certain was still raging somewhere beyond the trees. But they weren't hiding. They were fighting. They raided supply caches. They burned what they believed were enemy rice stores. They engaged in firefights with Filipino police and soldiers who came into the jungle looking for them. And those firefights had consequences that Onoda would carry for the rest of his life. It is estimated that across nearly 3 decades, up to 30 people died in encounters with these men. Filipino civilians, police officers, people who had no idea they were facing a soldier who genuinely, completely believed he was still at war. In 1954, 9 years after the war ended, Corporal Shimada was shot and killed in a clash with Filipino forces. And then there were two, Onoda and Kozuka, together in the jungle for 18 more years, through monsoons that turned their camps to mud, through fevers and injuries with no medicine, through the kind of isolation that hollows a person out from the inside. Think about what that means. 18 years, one companion, nothing but jungle, mission, and the distant certainty that somewhere, someone still needed them. In 1972, 27 years after the war ended, Filipino police caught Kozuka burning a farmer's rice stores and shot him. Now Onoda was alone, 50 years old, one man, one rifle, a jungle that had become the only world he knew, and a war that existed nowhere on Earth except inside his own mind. But the jungle was not finished with him yet. By 1974, most of Japan had long since decided Hiroo Onoda was dead. The government had officially declared him so back in 1959. His family had grieved and moved forward. His name had become a kind of legend, the soldier who vanished, the ghost of Lubang Island. But strange reports kept filtering out, unexplained fires on farms, figures glimpsed between the trees, raids with no explanation. Could he still be out there, after all this time? A young Japanese adventurer named Norio Suzuki decided to find out. Suzuki was the kind of man who treated the impossible as a personal invitation. Before leaving Japan, he told his friends he had 3 things to find on his world journey: Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, a giant panda, and the abominable snowman. In that order. He arrived on Lubang Island in February 1974. After just 4 days of searching, 4 days, he found him. Onoda stepped out from the trees with his rifle raised. A stranger had found his camp. In 30 years, that had never ended well. But Suzuki didn't run. He stood completely still, calm, open, unthreatening, and spoke in Japanese. "I've come to find you. Japan has been worried about you." They talked for hours. Suzuki told him everything. The war had ended in August 1945. Japan was now one of the most prosperous nations in the world. His family were alive. They wanted him home. Onoda listened. He could see that Suzuki was telling the truth. This young man had no hidden agenda, no propaganda angle. He believed him. And yet, his orders had come from a commanding officer. Military orders could only be rescinded by military authority. A civilian, however honest, however sincere, could not relieve him of his duty. "Find my commanding officer," Onoda said quietly. "Bring him here, and I will lay down my rifle." Suzuki returned to Japan carrying photographs, the first proof anyone had that Onoda was still alive. The images detonated across the country. The government launched an immediate search, and in a detail that feels almost too strange to be real, they found him. Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, the officer who had personally given Onoda his orders on Lubang Island in 1944, still alive, living quietly in rural Japan, running a bookstore. The man who had sent Hiroo Onoda into that jungle 30 years ago was now selling novels in a small Japanese town. He agreed without hesitation to go back. On March 9th, 1974, 29 years, 6 months, and 8 days after Japan's surrender, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi put on his old uniform and walked into the jungle of Lubang Island. He found Hiroo Onoda waiting. Two men standing in the green half-light, the officer who gave the order, the soldier who kept it. 30 years folded into a single moment of silence between them. Then Taniguchi straightened, and in a clear, formal voice he read the words aloud. "You are hereby relieved of all duties. The war is over. You are to lay down your arms." Onoda wept, not from relief, not from joy. What moved through him was something far heavier than either of those things, because in that moment, the entire architecture of his existence came apart. Every year endured, every sacrifice made, every person harmed in those jungle skirmishes, all of it, every single choice, had been built on orders that should have ended before he turned 24 years old. He laid down his rifle, still perfectly maintained after 3 decades in the jungle. His sword, 500 rounds of ammunition, and a dagger his mother had pressed into his hands at 22, with quiet instructions to use it on himself if he was ever captured. He had never used it. On March 11th, he formally surrendered to Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos, who granted him a full pardon for everything done while he believed himself to be at war. The world's press gathered from everywhere. Marcos called him a man of remarkable honor. Onoda returned to Japan in his faded imperial uniform, the same one he had worn into the jungle in 1944. And 8,000 people were waiting at the airport. He was 52 years old. He had left Japan at 22. 30 years, swallowed whole. The country that greeted him bore no resemblance to the one he had left. The empire was gone. The cities gleamed with glass and neon. The values he had been sent to fight for, absolute loyalty, sacrifice above all else, were no longer what Japan stood for. He was a man out of time, standing in a future that had been built entirely without him. Hiroo Onoda never quite found his footing in modern Japan. The country celebrated him, but he was deeply unsettled by what he saw. A younger generation, he felt, had lost direction, lost discipline, lost a sense of what life was actually for. And underneath all of it, quiet and immovable, was his guilt over those who had died in that jungle while he was fighting a war that no longer existed. Within a year, he left. He moved to Brazil, built a cattle ranch from the ground up, and tried to begin again somewhere that didn't carry the weight of everything he'd left behind. But the jungle had given him something he couldn't set down. In 1980, he read a news story about a Japanese teenager who had murdered his parents. Something in that story reached into him and broke something open. He returned to Japan and founded the Onoda Nature School, a wilderness camp for young people, built on the belief that resilience, purpose, and the value of life could still be taught. That the things hardship had given him didn't have to stay buried in a Philippine jungle. He spent his final years not fighting, but building, teaching, passing on what survival had taught him, stripped of its tragedy, kept for its truth. Hiroo Onoda died on January 16, 2014, in a Tokyo hospital. He was 91 years old. When a journalist once asked what had kept him going through 30 years alone, through the deaths, the hunger, the silence of that endless green world, he answered without hesitation, "Nothing but accomplishing my duty." Hiroo Onoda was many things, and none of them are simple. He was a man of iron will and absolute loyalty, a product of a system that consumed him completely, a soldier who caused real harm in service of orders that should have died decades before he did, and a man who, once the war finally ended, chose to use everything it had cost him to help people rather than hurt them. Was he a hero? A victim? A warning? Perhaps all three. Perhaps the answer shifts depending on which part of the story you're standing in. What is beyond question is this: he was given an order, and he kept it. For 29 years, 6 months, and 8 days, through the loss of every man who stood beside him, through isolation, hunger, and the slow erasure of everything he had ever known. He was the last soldier of a war the world had long since buried. And he never, not once, stopped fighting. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to the Time Navigator, because history is full of people like Hiroo Onoda, people the world forgot, people whose stories deserve to be told. There are many more where this one came from.